The rain was pouring down heavy that evening, as if the sky itself was grieving. The streets of the city were washed in silver light from the street lamps, and the rhythmic sound of raindrops hitting the car window filled the air. Inside his sleek black limousine sat Edward Malone, a man known by everyone in the business world as a genius investor, a self-made millionaire, and a man who seemed to have everything anyone could ever want. But despite the luxury around him, the fine leather seats, the quiet hum of the engine, and the glow of the digital dashboard, Edward felt strangely hollow. He had just left another meeting that ended with applause and handshakes. Another deal closed, another empire expanded, yet something inside him felt missing, something he could not name. The traffic light ahead turned red and the car slowed to a stop. Edward absent-mindedly gazed out the window, watching the people rush by, umbrellas bobbing like dark flowers in the storm. He sighed, reaching for his phone to check his emails again, but just as his eyes drifted toward the sidewalk, he froze for a second. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but no, what he saw was real. His heartbeat quickened. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned closer to the glass. There, in the middle of the rain, sitting alone on a park bench soaked from head to toe, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her hair was plastered to her face, her small hands clutching a sandwich wrapped in a napkin. She was eating slowly, taking tiny bites as if she wanted it to last as long as possible. Her shoes were muddy, her clothes clung to her skin, and the rain showed no mercy, yet she sat there quietly, as if the storm didn't exist. Edward's breath caught in his throat. The girl's face was familiar. Heartbreakingly familiar it was. Maya, his adoptive daughter. The same little girl he had brought home 2 years ago, the same child who had once laughed so brightly that the sound could light up his mansion. But what was she doing here alone, in the cold, eating like she had nowhere else to go? Without a second thought, Edward shouted at his driver, "Stop the car now!" The tires screeched against the wet road as he threw open the door, ignoring the rain that instantly drenched his expensive suit. He ran toward her, his shoes splashing through puddles. "Maya," he called, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here? You'll get sick." The little girl looked up at him, her eyes wide, not with surprise, but with a deep, quiet sadness that made Edward's heart sink even deeper. Edward stood there in the pouring rain, clutching Maya's small shoulders, the world around them fading into the sound of water hitting the pavement. He tried to smile to hide the panic in his chest, but his mind was spinning. How could this have happened? How could his own daughter be sitting out here, alone in the cold? He had given her everything she could ever need, or so he thought. He had built a world of comfort around her, a mansion filled with light art and luxury, but right now she looked like a child who had never known comfort at all. 2 years ago, he had met Maya at a charity event. It had been one of those evenings where rich men in black suits gathered to prove they had hearts too. The children from the orphanage were lined up to sing a song for the donors. Edward had sat there barely paying attention, scrolling through his phone, when a small voice broke through the noise. It was soft, yet filled with emotion. He looked up and saw her, a little girl with deep brown skin and eyes that glowed like sunlight on honey. She wasn't the loudest or the most polished, but there was something about her, a kind of light that made her stand out. She smiled at him that night, and something inside him shifted. He hadn't smiled back at anyone like that in years. He visited the orphanage the next day and learned her name, Maya. Her mother had passed away, and no one had come for her. Edward didn't know what came over him, but within a month he had adopted her. He promised himself he would give her the best life possible. And at first, everything was perfect. He filled her room with toys, new clothes, and bright pink curtains. He hired tutors to teach her and caretakers to look after her. He even bought her a puppy she would run down the halls, laughing, her small footsteps echoing through the mansion. He thought he had saved her. He thought he was being a good father. But as time passed, his world began to pull him back. The meetings, the business trips, the constant calls. His assistant's voice became more familiar to him than his daughter's laugh. He would come home late, see her asleep in bed, and tell himself he'd spend time with her tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Days turned to weeks, and the gap between them grew wider. He didn't notice the drawings she left on his desk or the notes she slipped under his door with words written in crayon. Daddy, can we play today? He thought love was about providing, but to her, love was about being there. And somewhere between the deadlines and the deals, he forgot that the rain softened to a drizzle as Edward knelt beside Maya, his heart pounding. With guilt and confusion, he could barely speak, his throat tight and heavy. Maya, sweetheart, he said softly. Why are you sitting out here eating alone, you? No, we have food at home. His voice shook as he brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. She didn't look upright, away, her little fingers tightening around the soggy napkin that held her sandwich. For a long moment, she said nothing, and the silence between them felt louder than the rain. Finally, she whispered, I didn't want to eat alone again. Edward blinked, not sure he heard her. Right, alone, he repeated, his voice barely a breath. Maya nodded, her eyes filling with tears that mixed with the raindrops on her cheeks. The cook leaves my plate on the table, she said softly. You're always busy in the house. It's so big, I don't like eating there. It feels empty. Her words hit him like lightning. He tried to speak, but no words came. She kept going, her voice trembling. I wanted to come here because it's where Mommy used to bring me. Before she went to heaven, we would sit on that bench and share food. She'd tell me stories and laugh, and it made me feel warm inside. Edward felt his chest tighten painfully. He had forgotten that the park near their mansion was the same one mentioned in her adoption file. It was where she used to go with her biological mother before the accident. He had driven past this park 100 times, never realizing what it meant to her. Maya sniffled and took another small bite of her sandwich. I come here sometimes when I miss her, she said, and today I just wanted to feel like someone was sitting with me again. The rain didn't bother me because it feels like she's still here. Edward couldn't hold back anymore. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, hugging her tightly as if she might disappear. I'm so sorry, Maya, he whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't see what you were feeling. She didn't answer. She just leaned against him, her small frame shivering against his soaked suit, and for the first time in a long time, Edward realized how far apart they had drifted. All the money in his world, all the marble floors and golden lights meant nothing. At that moment, what mattered was the child in his arms, a little girl who had been craving not wealth or comfort, but warmth and love. Edward held Maya close as the rain continued to fall around them, his mind spinning back through years he had tried to forget. He remembered being a little boy himself, sitting on the back steps of a huge, empty house watching the rain come down. His father had been a powerful man too, always gone, always busy, always saying, we'll spend time. Later never came. He could still see his younger self waiting at the window for a man who never showed up. That same cold, lonely feeling crept up his spine now as he looked at Maya's face, pale from the chill and heavy with sadness. He realized in that moment that he had become exactly what he once swore he never would. He had promised himself that when he had a family, he would be different. He would be the kind of father who showed up, the kind who cared, but somewhere along the way, success had swallowed him whole. The meetings, the headlines, the constant rush for more had blinded him to the small things that truly mattered, the drawings on his desk, the laughter in the hallways, the sound of his daughter calling him to play. All of it had faded into the background noise of his own ambition. He had thought love was about protection, about providing a safe life, but now kneeling in the wet grass beside his daughter, he saw the truth. Love wasn't about having everything. It was about being there when you had nothing. Maya looked up at him, then her small hands trembling. As she wiped her eyes, Daddy, she whispered softly, do you still love me? Edward's breath caught in his throat as tears burned his eyes. More than anything in this world, Maya, more than anything, he said, choking on his words. Then why do you never eat with me? She asked, her voice so innocent, so honest that it shattered him completely. He pulled her into another hug, unable to speak. The rain soaked them both, but he didn't care. He wanted her to feel that he was here, really. Here, not just in name, but in heart. As they stood there in the quiet of the fading storm, Edward made himself a silent promise. He wouldn't be his father. He wouldn't be a man who measured love in wealth or numbers. He would be a man who measured it in moments in laughter, in time spent together, because in that moment he understood something he had never grasped before: the greatest poverty in the world is not the lack of money, but the lack of love. That night when they returned home, Edward felt like he was walking into his house. For the first time, the marble floors that used to impress him now looked cold and empty. The walls that once made him proud now felt like barriers keeping him away from what really mattered. He carried Maya upstairs, wrapped in a towel, her tiny arms still clutching his neck when she finally fell. Asleep, he stood by her door for a long time, watching her breathe quietly, and he realized how many nights he had missed moments like this, simple moments that could never be bought back, no matter how rich he was. The next morning, Edward did something no one in his company or staff had ever seen before. He canceled every meeting for the week. His assistant nearly fainted on the phone, but he didn't care. He turned off his phone, closed his laptop, and told his butler to take the day off. He walked into the kitchen, still in his casual clothes, and looked at the ingredients on the counter. For the first time in years, he was going to cook breakfast himself. He wasn't a great cook, but he didn't need to be. He scrambled eggs, unevenly burned the toast, and spilled orange juice all over the counter. When Maya came downstairs, rubbing her sleepy eyes, she froze, seeing her father covered in flour with a goofy grin on his face. "Good morning, princess," he said awkwardly. "I made breakfast." Maya blinked, then giggled her first real laugh in weeks. "You cooked?" she asked, trying not to laugh. "Harder." He nodded proudly, as if he had just closed another big deal. "Not just cooked," he said, pointing at the messy table. "I made it just for you." She climbed onto the chair and took a bite of the slightly burned toast and smiled. "It's perfect, Daddy," she said softly. They spent the rest of the day together, playing board games, drawing on paper, building a pillow fort in the living room, and watching her favorite cartoons. Edward listened to her stories, really listened. He realized how much he had missed, how many things she had been keeping inside. He promised her they would have dinner together every night from now on. No phones, no meetings, no excuses. As the day ended and she hugged him tight before bed, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace and love, the kind that no amount of success could ever give. Days turned into weeks, and Edward never went back to being the man he once was. Every morning, he made breakfast with Maya. Every evening, they ate dinner together. No business calls, no distractions. On Sundays, they returned to that same park where he had found her in the rain. But this time they didn't come alone. They brought sandwiches, bottled water, and warm clothes for the children who sat alone on the benches, just like Maya once did. She would hand them food with a bright smile, saying softly, "Now, nobody has to eat alone." Edward soon started something bigger. He used his wealth and power to build a foundation. In Maya's name, the Maya Heart Foundation was created to help orphan children find families filled with real love, not just comfort and shelter, but connection, laughter, and care. The media called it a miracle transformation. Reporters asked what had inspired him, and he always gave the same answer: one rainy day, I realized that all the money in the world means nothing if you don't have someone to share a meal with. Years later, Maya grew up strong and kind, always reminding her father of the day that changed their lives, the day he finally understood that love is not about what you give, but about how you show up when someone needs you most. Edward no longer chased the next big deal or the next million. Instead, he chased smiles, memories, and moments of laughter, because he knew that true riches were not kept in banks but in hearts. As the sun set over the city one quiet evening, Edward sat on that same park bench watching Maya play with other kids. He looked up at the sky, now glowing with golden light, and whispered softly, "Thank you for the rain, because without it I would never have seen what truly matters. Sometimes it takes a storm to open our eyes. Sometimes we must lose our way to find what truly matters. Remember, love isn't about how much you have, but how much you give from your heart." If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. See you in the next video, where another story will remind you that kindness can change a life forever.